I. Miller Files. I have worked missing persons cases for more than 2 decades. Some disappearances scream violence, some smell like escape, and some sit quietly between the two until history itself swallows the truth. Sneha Philip belongs to the 3rd category. Her name is often spoken only in connection with one date: September 11th, 2001. But if you want to understand why Sneha vanished, you have to start before the towers fell, before the smoke, before the noise, before the world decided she must be dead. You have to start with who she was and who she was becoming. Sneha Philip was 27 years old, a doctor in training, a woman raised in discipline, expectation, and silence. Her parents were Indian immigrants, deeply religious, deeply invested in success as survival. To them, education was not just opportunity, it was obligation. Sneha followed the script: medical school, residency, marriage. From the outside, she looked accomplished. From the inside, she was unraveling. Hospital records show a pattern: missed shifts, alcohol-related concerns, formal warnings. She was not a bad doctor. She was a distracted one. In medicine, distraction is dangerous. In families like hers, it is unforgivable. By the summer of 2001, Sneha was facing suspension. Her residency program was preparing disciplinary action. Her career was hanging by a thread. That alone would be enough to break some people. But Sneha was carrying more than professional failure. She was married to Ron Lieberman, a corporate attorney. They lived in Battery Park City, an expensive neighborhood just blocks from the World Trade Center. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Friends described their marriage as distant. 2 professionals sharing space but not intimacy. Sneha spent nights away, sometimes with friends, sometimes with people her husband did not know. Investigators later uncovered evidence suggesting Sneha was exploring relationships with women. For her family, this was not just taboo. It was unacceptable. Imagine the pressure. A woman raised to succeed now, failing at work, failing at marriage, failing at the identity chosen for her. This is the psychological landscape we must understand. Because people do not disappear in a vacuum. They disappear when the life they are living becomes impossible to continue. On September the 10th, 2001, Sneha left her apartment in the afternoon. No suitcase, no passport, no farewell note. At 6:43 p.m., she was captured on surveillance camera at Macy's Herald Square. The footage is calm, ordinary. She browses, she shops, she pays, she buys lingerie, high-heeled shoes, bed sheets. These details matter. People planning to die do not buy bed sheets. People planning to vanish sometimes do. After that moment, Sneha Philip disappears from recorded history. No phone calls, no credit card use, no emails. That night, she does not return home. Her husband later tells police they argued, but arguments were common. No missing persons report is filed, no alarms are raised, because no one yet understands that this is not another overnight absence. It is the beginning of a mystery that will be buried beneath one of the worst days in modern history. When the sun rises on September 11th, Sneha Philip is already gone. And when the towers fall, so does any chance of a clean investigation. In the days that follow, her disappearance is absorbed into the catastrophe. A convenient explanation emerges. She was a doctor. She lived nearby. She must have run toward the chaos. It sounds heroic. It sounds comforting. But comfort is not evidence. And evidence is what this case lacks. In the next episode, I will take you into the morning of September 11th and show you how a narrative was built, not from proof, but from need. Because sometimes a story is chosen, not because it is true, but because it allows everyone else to move on. I am Miller Files, and this case is only beginning. I want you to picture the morning of September 11th, 2001. Not as history remembers it, but as investigators experienced it, because what happened that morning did more than destroy buildings. It destroyed timelines, witness memory, and the possibility of clean answers. At 8:46 a.m., the first plane hits the North Tower. Within minutes, Manhattan turns into a city without order. Phones fail, sirens drown out voices, streets flood with smoke and confusion. In those first chaotic hours, Sneha Philip becomes invisible. There is no confirmed sighting of her that morning, no camera footage, no witness placing her near the World Trade Center. And yet this is where the official story begins. Sneha was a doctor. She lived nearby, therefore she must have run toward the disaster. That assumption is repeated so often it becomes fact. But investigation does not work on assumptions. I examined hospital intake records from that morning. Emergency rooms across lower Manhattan were overwhelmed. Doctors arrived from everywhere. Off-duty staff, volunteers, medical students, names were written down, badly quickly. Sometimes not at all. Sneha's name appears nowhere. Not in hospitals, not in triage lists, not in morgue records, not in missing rescue personnel. This absence matters. If Sneha had rushed in to help, she would have needed identification, a badge, a license, something. She left all of it at home, her wallet, her ID, her phone. That is not how doctors respond to mass casualty events. In the weeks following the attacks, investigators searched debris. Human remains are catalogued. DNA testing begins. Over 1,000 victims are never identified. Sneha's DNA is not among the recovered remains. Some say this proves nothing. I disagree. Statistically, the chance that a person so close to the site, with no confirmed presence inside, leaves zero trace is low. Very low. Yet the narrative hardens. Media outlets begin calling her a 9/11 victim, a hero doctor. Her family embraces this explanation, not because it is proven, but because it is bearable. An unresolved disappearance is unbearable. A death with meaning is easier to survive. I do not fault them for that. But my job is not comfort, it is truth. And the truth is this. There is no evidence Sneha Philip was alive on the morning of September 11th. There is also no evidence she was dead, which leaves us with the night before. Investigators did little to reconstruct Sneha's movements after Macy's. No canvass of hotels, no serious examination of her social circle, no deep dive into potential relationships. Why? Because the city was in crisis. Resources were redirected. Cases were triaged. Sneha's disappearance was swallowed by scale. And something else happened. A legal process began quietly years later. In 2008, Sneha's family petitioned the court to declare her dead in the September 11th attacks. The judge approved it, not on forensic proof, but on probability, on circumstance, on the belief that she would not abandon her life without reason. But people do abandon their lives, especially when staying means suffocation. The court ruling closed the case legally, but it did not answer the questions. Who did Sneha meet after she left Macy's? Why was she buying items associated with intimacy and renewal? Why did she leave behind everything that would help her survive if she ran toward danger? These are not the questions of a woman rushing to die. They are the questions of a woman standing at a crossroads. In the next episode, I will take you back to the hours after 6:43 p.m. on September the 10th and show you the blind spots investigators never filled. Because if Sneha Philip vanished, it did not happen in the fire and smoke of September 11th. It happened quietly, deliberately, while the world was not yet watching. I am Miller Files, and the truth is still waiting. To understand what happened to Sneha Philip, we have to return to the night everyone stopped asking questions. September the 10th, 2001. After 6:43 p.m. After the camera at Macy's stops rolling. After the city still believes tomorrow will be normal. This is where the trail should have begun. Instead, it ends. Law enforcement never fully reconstructed Sneha's movements that night. Not because they did not care, but because something bigger erased urgency. That night, Sneha did not go home. Her husband, Ron Lieberman, later told police they had argued about what he could not say clearly, about everything and nothing. But there is something important here. Sneha staying out overnight was not unusual. She had friends who lived across the city. She had a social life separate from her marriage. She had secrets. This matters because disappearances are often misread when behavior is misunderstood. If a person has never stayed out before, one missed night is alarming. If a person often disappears briefly, that same absence feels ordinary. Sneha's last confirmed sighting shows her calm, purposeful. She is not dressed like someone fleeing. She is not dressed like someone preparing for disaster. She looks like someone heading toward another chapter. Investigators later searched for hotel records under her name. Nothing. But Manhattan is not a city that requires reservations. Cash hotels existed. Friends' apartments existed. And there is another possibility no one wanted to explore too deeply. Sneha may have met someone that night. Evidence recovered later suggests Sneha was exploring romantic relationships with women. Emails, witness statements, patterns of behavior. This was minimized at the time. In 2001, the media did not treat same-sex relationships with neutrality. Families often suppressed it. But from an investigative standpoint, this is critical. A secret relationship is one of the most common elements in voluntary disappearances. Not because love makes people vanish, but because love offers somewhere to go. If Sneha met someone that night, someone who offered understanding, someone outside the expectations crushing her, then that meeting could explain everything that followed. And yet no serious effort was made to identify potential partners. Names were not followed up. Timelines were not cross-checked because September 11th happened. Once the towers fell, the idea that Sneha vanished voluntarily became socially unacceptable. People needed heroes, not ambiguity. But I have reviewed enough missing persons cases to know this pattern. A personal crisis. A fractured identity. A final night of ordinary behavior, followed by a historical event that erases the trail. That is not coincidence. That is opportunity. Another overlooked detail is what Sneha left behind. Her passport, her social security card, her medical credentials, her phone, her money. People argue this means she did not plan to disappear. That argument assumes disappearance is always planned in advance. Often it is not. Often it is a decision made in hours or minutes based on emotion rather than logistics. A person does not need documents to disappear temporarily. They only need distance and time. Sneha had both. When investigators finally considered the possibility she left intentionally, years had passed, leads were cold, Witnesses, memories faded. The city moved on. The narrative was already fixed. Sneha Philip died on September 11th. But narratives are not evidence. They are consensus, and consensus can be wrong. In the next episode, I will examine the legal and media machinery that transformed an unresolved disappearance into an accepted death. Because once a story is officially declared, questioning it becomes an act of defiance. And defiance is where real investigations begin. I am Miller Files, and the night of September the 10th still holds answers. There is a moment in every unresolved case when investigation quietly gives way to narrative. Sneha Philip's case crossed that line years after she vanished. Not because new evidence emerged, but because patience ran out. By 2008, the city of New York had rebuilt physically and emotionally. But some families were still living inside unanswered questions. Sneha's family wanted closure. Closure is a powerful force. It can heal, and it can distort. They petitioned the court to declare Sneha dead as a victim of the September 11th attacks. From a legal perspective, the request made sense. She disappeared near the World Trade Center. She was a doctor. She was never seen again. From an investigative perspective, it raised alarms. Because courts do not determine truth. They determine resolution. The judge did not require forensic evidence. No DNA, no eyewitnesses, no proof of presence inside the towers. The ruling relied on probability, on narrative momentum, on what felt most reasonable to accept. Sneha Philip was officially declared dead. The moment that order was signed, the investigation ended in practice. Cases declared dead stop being questioned. Files are closed. Budgets disappear. What troubled me was not the decision itself, but what happened after. Media outlets retroactively rewrote the story. Headlines framed Sneha as a hero doctor who rushed into danger. Articles omitted uncertainty. Doubt became disrespect. Anyone who questioned the narrative was accused of cruelty, but investigation is not cruelty. It is obligation. I reviewed how the media handled conflicting details. Sneha left behind her identification. This was explained away as chaos. No witness placed her at the site. This was blamed on confusion. No remains were identified. This was attributed to the scale of destruction. Each missing piece was smoothed over until absence itself became proof. This is how myths are born. A myth does not need evidence, it only needs repetition. And once repeated often enough, it becomes untouchable. But cases like this demand resistance, because beneath the story of a heroic death is a simpler and more uncomfortable truth. No one actually knows what happened to Sneha Philip. By declaring her dead, the system chose certainty over accuracy. I spoke to investigators off the record. Some admitted doubts, others admitted relief. An unresolved disappearance tied to the largest attack in American history is not something institutions want to carry. It complicates memory. It introduces ambiguity into tragedy. So ambiguity was erased, but ambiguity does not disappear. It just goes underground. There is another consequence to declaring a person dead. You stop looking for them. Potential sightings go unreported, leads are dismissed, questions are considered settled. If Sneha Philip chose to leave, if she rebuilt her life elsewhere, that ruling ensured she would never be searched for again. People often ask me why someone would abandon everything. They assume disappearance requires planning and coldness. In reality, it often requires desperation. Sneha faced professional collapse, familial rejection, and a future she could not control. The night before, September 11th, she was shopping for items associated with intimacy and renewal. That does not align with surrender. It aligns with transition. The court ruling transformed a living question into a dead answer. And dead answers are convenient, but convenient answers are rarely true. In the final episode, I will return to the question that still matters. If Sneha Philip did not die on September 11th, what became of her, and why does the truth still resist closure? I am Miller Files. And some stories refuse to stay buried. I have investigated murders that ended with arrests, disappearances that ended with bodies, cold cases that eventually spoke through a single overlooked detail. The case of Sneha Philip did none of that. It ended in silence. Not the clean silence of resolution, but the heavy silence of questions that refused to die. When I reviewed the file for the final time years after the courts ruled Sneha an official victim of the September 11th attacks, I realized something unsettling. The case did not conclude. It simply stopped. No physical evidence placed Sneha inside the World Trade Center. No eyewitness saw her enter the towers. No recovered remains were definitively linked to her. What existed instead was absence, and absence became the evidence. In investigative journalism, absence can be the loudest testimony of all. Sneha Philip vanished at the precise moment when New York lost the ability to hear individual stories. On that morning, 3,000 people disappeared into smoke, fire, and steel. Sneha became one of them without ever being seen among them. The courts accepted that conclusion not because it was proven, but because no alternative could be proven either. I have never been comfortable with that logic. Sneha's life before September 11th was not stable. She was intelligent but adrift, married but distant, licensed but unemployed, brilliant but battling something inside herself. Her recent legal trouble at Century 21 suggested impulsivity. Her strained marriage suggested emotional withdrawal. Her lack of contact with family suggested intentional silence. Those are not signs of a woman anchored firmly to routine. They are signs of someone capable of stepping away. And yet, Sneha loved New York. She loved walking downtown. She loved movement. She loved unpredictability. On the night before the attacks, she shopped, dined, wandered. She was alive in the city. Could she have gone to the towers to help? Possibly. Could she have died anonymously among thousands? Yes. Could she have chosen to disappear into the chaos of that day? Also, yes. The truth is that September 11th created the perfect cover story for vanishing. No surveillance was preserved. No cell phone pings were recoverable. No reliable timeline survived the collapse. For someone who wanted to leave their life behind, history itself provided the escape. But believing that requires accepting that Sneha never contacted her family again, never used her medical training, never surfaced in another country, never left a trace. I have learned that people who disappear rarely vanish completely. They surface in fragments. A document, a witness, a mistake. Sneha left nothing. That absence haunts me more than any theory. In the final analysis, I believe the official conclusion tells us more about our need for closure than about Sneha's fate. Declaring her a victim allowed her family to mourn, allowed the city to count its dead, allowed the case to be filed away. But truth does not require comfort. It requires honesty. And the honest answer is this. We do not know what happened to Sneha Philip. She may have died trying to help strangers. She may have been overwhelmed by forces beyond control. She may have chosen to step into a new life under the cover of catastrophe. All three possibilities remain alive. As an investigator, I am trained to follow evidence. In this case, evidence stops at a department store receipt and a lobby security desk. Everything beyond that is human interpretation. Sneha Philip exists today not as a solved case, but as a mirror. She reflects how disaster can erase identity, how chaos can swallow truth, how quickly a life can slip beyond documentation, and how sometimes the most unsettling answer is not mystery, but uncertainty. This is Detective Miller Files, and this case remains open in everything but name.